Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras, the Changing America. I'm Anthony Moreno. Today we welcome an author and professor whose book talks about a woman's education in the maquila industry in Juarez. Our guest is Dr. Elaine Hampton. She is author of Anay's Will to Learn, a woman's education in the shadows of the maquiladoras. Dr. Hampton, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Anthony. Great to be here.
All right, now this is an amazing story. Learning about Anay, I was wondering if you could give us a brief intro and tell us a little bit about her and how you first met her.
Yeah. I was, back in the early 2000s, I was a professor at UTEP, and I was very interested in how these 250, 300 big factories that were located in Ciudad Juarez, I knew they'd impacted the community tremendously, and I was interested in finding out what was going on with the education environment around those factories. Were they supporting education? Were they providing schools for the 250,000 employees that were there working in those factories? So I continually searched for ways to get into Juarez and to find those people and find those communities and get to know them. And a friend of mine in a church in Las Cruces said they were going down to visit a church in Juarez. So she said, would you like to go? It'll be in that area where the maquiladoras are. So sure. And we got to the church and I saw this young woman with a baby on her hip. And she was very friendly and outgoing, and she found out I could speak Spanish, so we started talking. And I like to hold babies, so she let me hold her baby. And in the church service, the baby was rowdy, so I went out to the street outside the little tiny building of the church. And she came with me, and we began our conversation. The second sentence out of her mouth, I guess she knew I was from the university. The second sentence was, I'm really smart, I'm good in math, and I'm going to go to the university. And we started a relationship, and it just continued from there on. And I watched her get to that point, actually.
Now, in this book, you talk about the history, her story, and it starts in extreme poverty. I was wondering if you could share with us about it.
Right. She grew up deep in southern Mexico in Chiapas, very rural community. Wonderful ranchito. She escorted me back there for a while. I got to meet the grandmother that she grew up with. Just a palm top little dwelling, and gardens around and fruit trees around. So it seems like a paradise, except that it floods out quite regularly, and there's very little access to so many of the things that you need, and especially education. So she had a wonderful primary school experience. There were two professors, they call them profe, two teachers that cared very much about that little ranchito, and they would come from the larger town to that little ranchito and hold school under the big mango tree. And they saw how smart she was, and they supported her and encouraged her, and she and quite a few other kids got a good education through 1st through 6th grade. But she had to, at the end of, after school was over, she went to her grandmother, and her grandmother put a basket on her head and filled it with fruit or a little rolled up dough ball that she fried that were called a nuegado, which is delicious, like a donut hole. But Anay had to put that on her head and walk miles and miles to the neighboring communities and sell everything. And in a culture where violence is common, she got beat pretty royally if she didn't sell everything, and maybe if she did, if the grandma was drinking, which she did at that time. She's turned into a wonderful woman now, but it was a rough life for Anay as a child.
Now, this isn't very uncommon for children in that region to stop school at, say, the 6th grade,
right,
and go to work because they really have no choice to feed their family. And it seems like things really changed in the late 80s, early 90s with the implementation of NAFTA.
Right.
And that seems to be the backdrop of a lot of the circumstances that you describe in your book. I was wondering if you could really talk with us a little bit about the impact that really had in folks in that region or in rural Mexico especially.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So we're seeing deep in southern Mexico, the most southern state, what was going on there. And I finished 6th grade, and even the teachers, everybody wanted her to go on, but her grandmother said, no, girls don't go to school, so you will work as a maid. So she hired her out as a maid. Then up here in the northern part, NAFTA was in place, opened all the free trade agreements, 250 Fortune 500 factories located in that city within a 30-year span. The city, Ciudad Juarez, tripled in population. So the Mexicans were excited because there was full employment for a while. In fact, so many factories and so few employees that they needed more employees. So the factories would send buses, actually not the factory, they would contract someone else to send buses or vans into southern Mexico and woo people. So Anay was in the center part of town when a van came to town, and a man with a loudspeaker said, come everyone and listen to what's going on. And he said, if you come to Juarez, we'll give you a free ride on the van to Juarez, we'll give you free housing, we'll give you you can earn up to $100 a month. You get free food, so, and you can go to school if you want to. And I heard, go to school if you want to. She begged and begged and begged, and her grandmother and grandfather finally let her go, but Grandpa wouldn't let her go alone. So Grandpa and I and about 16, 17 other people got on this van, which was supposed to hold 12 or something, and they drove a horrible nightmare trip all the way to Juarez. And they let Anay off at the free housing, which was a big warehouse with cardboard on the floor, and that was your home. And she could stay there for up to 2 or 3 weeks. And they put her to work in the factory, changed her birth certificate, so I said she was 16 instead of 14 or 15, and put her to work. And they did provide lunch, and if she worked, well, the people who had been there quite a while, if they worked a double shift, could get maybe $80, but they paid Anay $5 a day, $5 a day. So she was getting $20 a week, and a cardboard bed in a warehouse with many, many, many other people, all genders, everybody. And the education, yes, you could go to school. There was a school provided, and here's what that school was. It's not a school like we know it all. So there were 200 people on a waiting list, and there were 50 people allowed in the school. And the school was just after your turn at work, after your work session was over, you could go into this room if you were one of the lucky 50 people, and there would be a tutor. Now in Mexico they have a program called Open Education, which is you get a book, you read the book, you answer the questions, you take a test, and if you do 32 of those or 34, you get your middle school degree. So there's about 10 to 12 books per year, and that's where Anay was stuck. She really wanted that middle school degree. So she was way on the bottom of the line, but her mother said, oh, I'm almost at the top of the line to go into that school, but I don't want to go. So Anay took her mother's place and slipped into school. And Anay worked through most of those books. The tutor could answer some of the questions for you, maybe or maybe not. And the tutor would help you take the test, and you have to pay a fee to take each test. So Anay worked through almost all of them. The factory shut down, laid off employees, and lost all the paperwork. That happened a second time to Anay. They didn't. It was obviously a carrot, an incentive to keep people working in the factory, and they were not interested in making sure that people got their degrees. So finally, on a third time, she went to a Catholic church, and they provided the same service. They allowed her just to test out of everything. She still had to pay. But she finally got her middle school degree by doing that. But she finally tested out of most of them, finished two of the books, and finished her middle school degree.
That's not, it seems like you mentioned that many factories use that as an incentive for, employees to take part in that. But you mentioned that there was only 50 employees that could, out of probably hundreds or thousands of people, and you've researched some of this, and I was wondering if you could share with us how uncommon her situation was to how it really is for most factories and employees there.
Yeah, and I had some kind of perseverance. She would not give up on this desire. So others, if they even have the hope, number one, it's extremely difficult to read a book and answer the test. over and over again when it may be challenging to you. So I had researched quite a few factories in this previous research. I'd gone into quite a few factories and interviewed quite a few people to see had they taken any kind of education like that. And very few, a very small percent, will actually finish that kind of education process. But some are really motivated to do it. So she was indeed one of the few that was lucky enough to get into it. And then the problem came, so her work turn was over. She stayed late. So that meant now she's out of the maquiladora at a time when there's no bus to run. So she has to wait for an hour or two at the bus stop.
Which is a very dangerous time, especially when she was working at the maquiladora during that time. And there's also a story of her almost being abducted as well.
Right. Yeah. This was during the time when 30 women were abducted, and all of this time, and many theories and stories about what went on, but it was horrible. Our wonderful Diana Washington Valdez from the El Paso Times, several people have some good books that document exactly what went on. And Anay was standing at the bus stop, and a man came by and tried to get her into the pickup, but she was a strong girl and she held on, resisted the first time. The second time, the same man, she believes, came by. He had on a mask, but she said he had these yellow eyes. He had these yellow eyes, or yellow right under his eyes. So she tells me she believes it was the same man. So this time he tried to pull her away from the lamppost. It's a pretty busy intersection. And a man from one of the little convenience stores across the street saw that and came out, and actually he got hit and hurt pretty badly by the man who was trying to abduct Anay, but Anay was able to run away. So close. She came so close just because she could stay late and go to school. We have to put quotation marks around it.
And it seems like she believes that this was somebody she worked with as well.
She thinks that from the look on, 1,000 employees in the factories, but she believes that she saw that man somewhere in the factory, probably a security guard. That's very likely.
Now, unfortunately, this story is too common in the past years, especially in the maquiladoras. How has the recruitment of employees changed now compared to when Anay was working there? Because it seems like during this time, the early part of this past decade, companies were recruiting young single women to come and work at these factories. Mm-hmm. And that just, could you kind of explain a little bit about the dynamics that set up, mm-hmm. Especially with all this violence going on?
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, I went into 10 factories and did pretty thorough interviews, and these were U.S. factories that I went into, and there's some Korean, Japanese, some Mexican, a few other German factories in Juarez. I mean, in the whole country of Mexico, but I didn't look in those. But in the United States ones, as far as what is the regulations for taking care of employees, those were followed. I didn't see any sweatshop kind of behavior. However, if you hire women, and they really did, just as you said, the newspapers in the early days would say attractive young women, and that was what they wanted, and the all kinds of, I didn't get to document this, but the people that I've read about who had, the scholars that I'd read who had done this documentation found horrible abuses where, number one, they don't want you to be pregnant, so they quite often will insist that the women prove that they're menstruating so that they can continue with their job. Then there's women working on a line are kind of like in a bubble because you have the men who are the managers around. And so the men can start these, the unintentional or intentional, just the dynamics of a society when you have power plays in place. So the women are trying to be attractive to the men, so they would have any opportunity that would come along for an extra lunch benefit or whatever benefit might be around. And so the women would start dressing up and try to woo the managing men, and it created quite a horrible competition in there. The book details quite a few other kinds of abuses that are human rights abuses that go on in the factories. But just the fact that you're paid such a tiny, tiny fee, and then you're sent out into a community whose the price for goods in Ciudad Juarez is not that much different than the United States. In addition, these people live way on the periphery, so they have transportation costs, and there's no water for them delivered, so they have to buy expensive water. So it causes quite a stress in so many ways. To me, throughout the whole experience, I could only see people coming from the interior were not better, at best lateral, but probably if they could get access to a school, and for Anay's high school, she did have a good experience because she was in Ciudad Juarez. So a few trade-off, and she was very happy that she was in Juarez so she could get that experience, which she probably would not have had down in southern Mexico.
See. Now, what's really amazing with her story is, she endured, extreme poverty, surrounded by violence, but she also survived a lifetime of abuse.
Right.
From people within her family, and that's something that I was wondering if you could explain really how she conquered and fought her way through that.
Yeah, that when she was a child, she told me my earliest memory, I was holding the bottle and my stepfather was on top of me, playing with me. And she said, I grew up believing that was the way fathers treated their children. And when she said, when I got older, I told my grandmother I would never go with him. I would never go with him. So when she came up to Juarez, he was already here along with Anay's mother. So she was living in the warehouse, which was very, very uncomfortable. And the mother said, okay, you can come live with us if you will watch my children while I'm working. She didn't find that attractive at all, but she could manage to be away from the stepfather. So one time she thought the house was empty. She thought the stepfather was gone, so she went in to take a shower. And a shower, which just means there's no showers, it's a sponge bath. So he came in, and he went in and grabbed her. And she had on just her underwear and screamed and hollered. Unfortunately, she's a strong girl, and she ran out of the house and ran to a neighbor's house, who fortunately threw a blanket around her and helped her. And then she went to the small church where I found her, and a neighbor invited her to go there. I mean, she got dressed, of course, and things changed. Told her mother, and her mother said, get out of my house. I don't believe you. Get out of my house. You're trying to take my husband away. So a neighbor said, come in and I'll take you to this church. So that she went to this very small church full of very nice people. And they let her stay there a little while, and the youth minister said, you can come live with me and my family. So she went to live with that family, and pretty soon she and the youth minister fell in love, and he's a wonderful man, and they have a very strong family today. So, and she and Enrique still do their mission work, and now they're safe back in Chiapas where she came from. But when she clearly told me that it was very difficult, sexual relations were very difficult for them, and it was hard for her to ever use birth control, because she had so much violence that her poor little reproductive system was torn pretty badly. So they had 4 children, all pretty much unwanted and all very quickly, although they've turned that into a wonderful family. But by the time the 4th child came, she was in horrible shape. She had uterine cancer and was very, very sick, bleeding all the time, heavy bleeding. So she told me she was going to a clinic. I met her at the clinic, and Enrique and I waited outside, took care of the children while she went through quite a lengthy surgery. And the doctor came out. He was a U.S. doctor, but he spent time working in Mexico, charged them, but it was a very, very reasonable fee. He said she was just torn to pieces. It's a fissure that happens when women are abused, so that the anus, the separation between the anus and the vagina is just torn apart. But he said I was able to repair that, and I removed her uterus. So I think I've got the cancer, and I think if we take good care of her, she'll be okay. So she went home with lots and lots of chemotherapy just in the pill form, and Enrique took care of her and the kids, and she was able to come out of it.
Most of these things that she's endured, I mean, most people, anybody would throw in the towel, but it just seems like she keeps going and advances to getting a high school education. I was wondering if you could tell us about that, that process, that moment when she did graduate. You were there, and I was wondering if you could share that with us.
Yeah, I'm like you. I keep questioning, looking at her, staring at her, trying to find what made that persistence in her. But she was determined. So she found there was so in my search for maquiladoras that were helping the educational environment, I found this one because of Anay called Deval Medical Instruments. They wanted their employees to finish their high school degree, so they would actually pay for that. Now, you still had to work all day at the factory, and then you could run quickly to this high school that was a private high school. All high schools in Mexico are private, but a very creative woman, and I met her, a kind woman, started a high school that started at 5 o'clock, I believe, in the afternoon and went till 8 o'clock, and went every day so that you could actually get your high school degree if you worked really good in 3 years. But she had a very creative approach to designing the curriculum so that people could work through at this fast pace while you were working in the mornings or the daytime. Very hard on you because you work all day, go to school all night, stay up late, do homework, get up early, catch the bus, do a 2-hour ride to your factory. But Anay lived pretty close to the school. She was able to walk. It's a long walk, but she was able to walk if the car didn't work or she couldn't catch a bus. So I actually got to visit the school where she was, and she showed me her books that she was going through, met some of the teachers. At that time I was still a professor at UTEP. Some of my students went with me, and we did an interchange and interviewed some of the students. And their stories are very touching to me also. They have that same kind of hope that they can have something better because of their education. So Anay got ill again. She caught another round of the cancer and was out for quite a while, but the school allowed her to continue working from home as much as she could and just send her homework in by computer, or her husband would take it over to her. And she was able to graduate in the 3 years. So that was near the graduation was the time that we went back to Chiapas, and I met her family and learned about her early existence there. And so she'd ask her teachers, well, I get this chance to go on a research trip with my friend, my co-author. And the teacher said, no, you can't miss any of your classes. She said, well, I'm going anyway. So they said, well, you would have gotten a prize, but you missed school. So we went to the graduation ceremony, the Holiday Inn there in El Paso. Beautiful setup, everybody dressed nicely, very, very nicely. Anay had on the most beautiful dress, and her children had on beautiful little formal princess dresses, 3 of them. And the little boy in his fancy suit, and it was just a precious experience. And sure enough, Anay won the best student in the class. They couldn't avoid giving that to her because she really did well in spite of all of these troubles. And after it was all over, she told me that she had stayed up the night before sewing those dresses by hand. A friend had a daughter who had left, and she found an old box full of her old dresses, and I changed all those dresses around so that they fit her children. And the children had on little princess shoes that had looked like glass slippers with a little fish swimming in the heel of the slipper. And it was a wonderful experience. She wanted her kids to be there. Children were not really supposed to be there, but we snuck them in, and we all got to enjoy the wonderful experience and see her graduate.
We have just under about 3 minutes left. I was wondering if you can give us an update on Anay and Enrique and what they're doing now, and how they are. Good.
They're good church friends from Texas. It's a Church of Christ in Texas. Came and visited with them while they were doing their mission work in Juarez, in the real poor community. And they became very good friends with Anay and Enrique and respect very much what they do and their style of mission work. So they paid for Anay and Enrique to go back into Chiapas when the violence came. They just had to get their children away from that. They lived in one of the horrible areas. So now Enrique is doing his mission work, and Anay is the owner of 5 schools for women, and they're beauty schools, and she trains them how to do hair and all the cosmetology, and then they can go back to their ranchitos and can open little barber shops or beauty shops. in between her middle school and her high school, we thought she would not be able to get to high school. So Anay said, I'm going to beauty school. And I said, well, okay. So I helped and we got her to beauty school. And I thought, well, that's a waste of money and time. And when she got to Chiapas, she's found that there was very little training for women in any kind of economic area. So she used her degree and got her school set up, and she now has 5 schools going, and she's graduating some 50 women every year, getting them where they have their degrees and they can go and start their own businesses. So I'm very proud of her.
Well, it is definitely an exceptional story. I was wondering if you could share with our viewers where they could find out more information about your work and where they can get a copy of the book.
Right. University of Texas Press is the publisher, and you can certainly order it from them. They have a good price. It's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, but the prices are pretty high. The best price is my webpage, elainehampton.com, and I sell them at an introductory promotional price for a few more months. So they're welcome to get it there too.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us and sharing this amazing story, and look forward to learning about how things end up with Anay and your future.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Our guest was Elaine Hampton. She is author of Anay's Will to Learn, A Woman's Education in the Shadows of the Maquiladoras. I'm Anthony Moreno. Thank you for joining us on Fronteras, A Changing America.